Welcome back to the Lifestyle Listeners Show. I'm your host, Adrian McDonald, and today I'm going to be doing a Q&A. And these questions are ones that I got asked on my Instagram stories when I posted it recently. So I'm going to dive in. We're going to do a combination of training, nutrition, and even some lifestyle questions here also incorporated. And the first question that I got asked was, is lifting heavier weights the best for getting results? Okay. So let's kind of break this down first of all. And what does results mean for you? Does results mean dropping body fat? Does it mean building strength? How are you actually measuring your progress? Now, assuming the person asking this question wants to build muscle, I'll just kind of go through some of the specific pathways that you can actually incorporate and do this. So the way we build muscle, Brad Schoenfeld, his research has shown there's three specific ways. So mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscular damage. What do all of those big fancy words mean? So let's break this down. The first way that we actually can build muscle is mechanical tension. What does mechanical tension mean? That is by lifting heavy weights. So lifting heavy weights absolutely does build muscle. However, on its own, it's probably not enough. But that being said, it is beneficial. Why is lifting heavy weights beneficial? So there are a few benefits. Firstly, by lifting heavier weights, you actually get greater intra and intermuscular coordination. So intramuscular coordination, that's when like the fibers within a muscle unit, they're all like working together. And then intermuscular coordination, that's when different muscles are actually working together. So by lifting heavy alone, you will be recruiting more muscle fibers, and that is definitely beneficial when it does come to building strength and, of course, building muscle. However, lifting heavy on its own, it does have some drawbacks because it's hard to get enough volume in, and volume is like just sets times reps times weight that you lifted in a session. So suppose you're doing, like, if you look at a power lifter and they're maxing out at singles, if you're to count the number of reps that they actually did, we'll say above 90%, it's probably going to be, less than around 10 reps for the most part. And that could take, elite powerlifters up to an hour plus to actually build up that, when it comes to warm-up sets. So lifting heavy alone, it's really, really good, really beneficial. And I love lifting heavy. But just on its own, it's really hard to build up enough volume, which is why then we can move on to our second way of building muscle, and that is through metabolic stress. So what does metabolic stress mean? That is essentially training for the pump, okay, or training for the burn, the bodybuilding way, where you're probably going to be doing around about 8 to 12 reps. There's going to be a lot of time under tension. We all know that feeling where you're doing like a set of bicep curls, and those last couple of reps there, you just really feel like that blood flow, that burn in your arms and your biceps. And that's from like a large buildup of lactic acid. So metabolic stress is the second way that we can actually build muscle, and that's where you train for the pump. The final way then, going off Schoenfeld's research, is actually muscular damage. This kind of training, it's not the most enjoyable, but it definitely can be incorporated and can be beneficial. And essentially, it's like where you do eccentric training or slow negative training. So like, here's an example. Imagine you were doing a squat, and the rep range was, well, forget about the rep range, but the tempo you were doing the squat was like a 5-second lowering. I don't care what weight you're using. If you're doing squats with a 5-second lowering and you're doing even, say, I don't know, 8 to 10 reps, like that is just a lot of kind of negative training where you're really focusing on your tempo, you're controlling the lowering. Another example would be you sometimes might see bodybuilders do like negative reps. So an example would be, imagine you're doing a flat dumbbell bench press and you were using 20 kilos and 8 reps was the absolute most you could do. You banged out 8 reps and there's definitely not a 9th rep in you. What you might see, the negative rep method essentially is where you have a spotter behind you and all you have to do is lower the weight, and then the spotter would actually lift up your elbows to help you press the weight. Now, why do we do like muscular damage or eccentric or negative reps? Like, why is this training beneficial? Because you actually build more muscle on the lowering phase of a lift than you do when you press it. So suppose like you were doing, as I just said there, the chest press, and you were lowering it down for a count of 5 seconds. You build more muscle in the lowering phase than you do in the pressing or the concentric phase, where you press the weight back up to the start point. So they are some ways that we can build muscle. Do you have to lift heavy? No, but is it beneficial? Absolutely. I definitely love incorporating into my own training, to my clients' training, because people like feeling strong too. And you got to remember that progress is addictive. And the more progress you see in your training, in your numbers, in your lifts, it's going to make you want to come back for more and more. So yes, lifting heavy is beneficial, but I do also like to incorporate some of those other methods. So the metabolic stress, where you're training for the pump, and also some muscular damage, where you're controlling the lowering, or you might even have a spotter and do some negative reps. They are all different ways that you can actually build muscle. Okay. Next question then. So this is to continue on the topic of training, and I'm stuck in a plateau. Should I start changing things up, or is that normal? Or should I just keep going? So this one, without having a lot of context, I'll just kind of give some general guidelines and suggestions here. So first of all, like, what does the plateau mean? Or what does progress mean to you? How are you measuring your progress? Is progress done through your lifts in the gym? Is it done through like your weight in the scale? Is it done through your body fat? Or maybe it's a combination of all of those methods, which probably I would say would be best. So first of all, what does progress mean to you? But then secondly, we got to kind of dive deeper in. And I think some people are too quick to jump to the conclusion that they're in a plateau. Like, for example, if you were to add like 2.5 kilos to your bench press, okay, even just every month, like over the duration of a year, that's over 25, 30 kilos you're adding to your bench press. Now, you're not going to be able to add 25 to 30 kilos to your bench press every single year that you train, because, you know, the sky is just literally the limit. So progress is definitely not linear. Just like with weight loss, if you were to lose 1 kilo, just even 1 kilo a week, which is still fairly significant, does that mean that you're going to lose 52 kilos in a year, and then the second year it's going to be the same? So progress is not linear. That's the first thing. Okay. And how I would kind of measure if you think you're in a plateau, is let's just look at our progress over a duration of time. So say like the average duration of a training cycle might be 4 to 6 weeks. Let's look at your progress over those 4 to 6 weeks. And from where I started to where I finished, did I get stronger? Did my lifts, did my weights actually increase? Did my deadlift increase? Am I able to do more chin-ups? Am I able to do more reps on the overhead press? Whatever it might be. And then, you know, when it comes to like body composition, again, you need to have some kind of metric or way of tracking this. So how are you measuring your progress with body comp? Is this just by weight in a scale? So if it is just weight in a scale, well, did my weight go down? But it's probably good to incorporate other elements too, like maybe tape measurements. And have I dropped down, you know, a waist size? Or if you want to use like a calipers, has my overall body fat percentage reduced? These are all like different metrics and way we can actually analyze and monitor your progress. So I guess the takeaway here would be, if you think you're in a plateau, like, don't just too quickly jump to that conclusion. You got to like look at your progress over, we'll say like the duration of a training cycle, 4 to 6 weeks, and then make a decision on that. Okay, and then suppose that over 4 to 6 weeks you weren't making progress. You know, your weight didn't decrease, your body fat percentage hasn't gone down, your pictures don't look as good, your strength hasn't gone up. Well, then we do know the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So then it might be time to actually have enough variety or add some variety to your training so that you're actually able to progress again. And this is like a fine balance here, because, you know, especially when it comes to training, on one side you see people doing a different workout every week, And then on the other side, you see the same people doing the same workout week in, week out for months, weeks, or even for years, okay? You need to have that fine balance between both. Like an analogy I like to give is, imagine you were learning a language, and the first person, they were doing French, German, and Spanish, and they want to become fluent in all three of those. So on Monday they did French, on Wednesday they did German, and on Friday they did Spanish, compared to the second person, and they just want to be fluent in Spanish, and they know exactly that they got to improve their Spanish, and they do that on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. Over the course of 4 to 6 weeks, who is going to be better at just Spanish alone? The person who was like essentially, you know, doing French, German, and Spanish and learned a bit about each, but not enough about one, versus the person who just did it consistently. So that's kind of the way I like to look at, like, when to actually add variety and change your workouts up. You need to have that fine balance, because everything works, but nothing works forever. So that's on one side. You need to obviously change things up. But on the flip side then, if you change things up too quickly, how are you meant to get good at anything? Okay. So moving on then, a next question that I got. So this is actually more so now in relation to nutrition. And it is about the classic free meals or cheat days. The specific question is, should I allow myself to have a cheat day once in a while? Okay, so when it comes to cheat day, like, first of all, you got to remember your words have power. And if you just kind of classify foods as good or bad, that can just create like a negative or a bad relationship with food, because the more time you have that bad food, the more you're kind of telling yourself that you should feel guilty, that you're doing something wrong. And essentially that can create just a bad attitude, and for you to have like a bad mindset around food. So the first thing I'd say is, like, just address your mindset and be careful of the words you use around food, because, or just in general, your words do have power. Now, going off that then, okay, so is it okay to have cheat meals in a while? First of all, you got to ask yourself, like, where's the need for this coming from? Is it because you're overly restrictive? And often, like, here's the reason why most diets don't work. Especially like these 7-day detoxes or these cleanse diets, is because they're super restrictive, and they will get results over 7 to 14 days. But then there comes a point where you just get fed up. The switch just nearly tends to flick, and we go from being on to being off. And when we go from being on to being off, that's when then we actually have like a big, massive and all-out binge, because we just get fed up. So where's the need or the desire for this cheat day actually coming from? Is it because you're overly restrictive? And if so, that's maybe where you got to analyze further, like, how can I actually include foods that I enjoy into my diet so it doesn't feel like a diet? It's more so a lifestyle. Because the best diet is the one that is sustainable, that includes foods that you enjoy, that actually gets your results over the long term. And 7-day detoxes or cleanse diets or juice diets, they're not long-term sustainable. So there's no point doing them in the first place. Now, going back to cheat days, I still want to answer the question. So I feel with cheat days, I'm going to call them free meals for a start. I prefer that term. So I feel with free meals, usually one of two approaches people like to use. And the first one is, for some people, they like just have like one big free meal a week, and they go like super disciplined, would say Monday to Friday, and they have one free meal a week at the weekend. And again, I'm not saying this is right, this is wrong, but if that is you, and if that just works good for you, well, fair enough, incorporate that. What are some tips then that you can implement if you are having a free meal? The first thing I would say is, if you do choose to have a free meal, try eat out at a restaurant as opposed to doing it in your house. The reason being is because the amount of food in your home, it's probably going to be unlimited, and it can be hard to actually put a stop to it. So at least if you do it in a restaurant, you have to buy the food out, and you don't have this endless supply of nice treats and nice foods that you can actually be eating. Second tip I would give if you're having a free meal is try do with a friend. Just because you're less likely to overeat and overindulge, if you want to call it, if you're actually with someone than if you're on your own. Because loneliness can actually be a trigger for just actually mindless eating and eating too much. And then lastly, so you're eating out at a restaurant, you're having it with a friend, set a timer, and your free meal should last no longer than an hour. Because otherwise it can be, you know, a free day or even a free weekend, if you allow it. So at least just having a timer or a deadline, you know that, okay, I've got 1 hour here. I'm going to go to the restaurant, eat some nice foods, do with my friend, and then after the hour, that's it until next week. Now, again, if you want to incorporate this method, absolutely fine if that works for you. Probably wouldn't be my preferred approach, to be honest, because again, I like to incorporate foods that I enjoy and have them more so like on a consistent and daily basis. So if I want a piece of chocolate, I'll have a piece of chocolate, but I don't really crave it that much because I guess I'm aware of how my body works and what foods trigger cravings for me. Because I know, for instance, like for me, when it comes to like a bowl of cereal, for instance, there's no such thing as like just one serving of a cereal for me. Like whether that's granola or Cocoa Pops or any of these ones, I find it really, really hard to actually stop once I start. So I just do not allow myself to have cereal because that's like a domino food for me that I just find it really hard to control. But what I like to do instead is just microdose some of my favorite foods and have them on a daily basis. So again, as I was saying, if I want a piece of chocolate, I will have a piece of chocolate. And I'm able to just have a small amount and have that consistently over, would say 5 or 7 days. And then I don't really feel like the need to actually have a big binge at the weekend because I'm just including foods that I enjoy on a daily basis. Okay. But finally, just to wrap this up, so you have a few different options. You can just have like the once a week method where I spoke about with the restaurant, with your friend, lasting no longer than an hour. You can do it just more so on like on a daily basis and having a small amount every single day, which will be my preferred approach. But then finally, I would say, and I kind of touched on this already with the cereal for me, you got to identify what your domino foods are or what foods like you find hard to stop eating. And for me, I know at this stage that it is cereal. You know, going on another kind of topic here, a different rant would be like the Alcohol Anonymous and people who struggle with drinking alcohol. And sometimes you just got to cut it out and just say absolutely no more. So there's kind of like a fine balance here again between having a free meal, incorporating your favorite foods, and also just being aware of what foods are your weaknesses or your trigger foods, which can actually cause you to binge eat. And if you do have some weaknesses or trigger foods, which can cause you to binge eat, you know, the best thing might be just not to buy them at all. And out of sight, out of mind, keep it out of the press, keep it out of the house. So you're not going to be tempted to actually have it. Okay, quick sup of water. And the next question is, so again, it's on the topic of nutrition, and do you recommend eating just before bed? So this comes down to like a lot of different factors, but it really plays into your lifestyle. And it's easy to say like you shouldn't eat within X window or X amount of hours before bed, but what if you're like a busy shift worker, you're a nurse or you're a guard, and you find it hard to eat during the day because you're super busy at work? Does that mean you're not meant to eat at all? So it really does depend on your lifestyle. Now there's kind of two ways I look about this, just going off research, because Danny Lennon from Sigma Nutrition, so he did research on this, and it's basically called chrononutrition, where he analyzed, is it better to have like the bulk of your calories in the earlier part of the day and then kind of eat less of the day as the day goes on? And his kind of research, it's just still emerging from when I listened to his podcast. His recommendation was that it's probably better to eat more of your calories in the earlier part of the day and then shave them off as the evening approaches and nighttime approaches, simply because you're more active and you're probably likely to be more active in the earlier hours, especially during daylight hours. And then towards the evening time, if you're just indoors, you're not going to be as active, and therefore you're probably not going to be expending as much energy. So that is one side of the story. But then Shaun Stevenson, which goes to show everything is about balance, and it really does depend. Shaun Stevenson, author of both Sleep Smarter and Eat Smarter, his recommendation is the opposite, that he says that if you were to have like a bigger meal, or your biggest carbohydrate meal in particular, I think he spoke about, that it might be best to leave that in the evening time, so that then in the earlier parts of the day, you're using like fat as fuel, and you're kind of burning more of that body fat, as opposed to using the fuel or the energy you get from carbohydrates. So this is like a long way of basically saying it does depend. It depends on what works for you. It depends on your lifestyle. And it depends just on, I guess, your overall progress. You know, you got to kind of have some metrics though in place, and find out what works best for you. Like for some people, for instance, eating before bed will not affect their sleep at all, and they will sleep like a baby and be absolutely fine the next day. Other people, eating within an hour of bed, it can really like just have or lead to a bad night's sleep, which can then obviously, that might not be beneficial for that person. Just like with some people, that they can drink like a cup of coffee an hour before bed and just sleep absolutely fine. Whereas other people, they need to have like a cutoff time of maybe, 6, 7, 8 hours before bed, or otherwise it can impact their sleep. So do you recommend eating just before bed? Have some metrics in place. Like, does this affect your sleep? Does it impact upon your performance? How are you feeling the next day? But just some guidelines then, like suppose that it's like not practical for you to stop eating at a certain hour before bed. So ideally, like you want to be stopping eating around 2 hours before bed, I'd say would be like a good guideline. But if that's not practical for you, imagine you like training and you finished up and you didn't get home from maybe soccer, GA or rugby training till 9:30 at night. And then you go to bed around 10 o'clock or 10:30. The worst thing you can do after training is not eat, because then the next day you're going to have so much muscle soreness, your recovery is going to be impacted. So what do you do in that situation? And my advice here would be, the bigger the meal you have, keep it further away from bed. And then closer to bedtime, it might be better in this instance. Suppose you did have training and you finish up training and you got to be up early in the morning, to have some form of like a post-workout shake. Just simply being because you absorb food and you digest food easier and better through liquid form than you do actually by eating it, because the food is already partially broken down for you. So that would be my kind of guideline there. If it is closer to bedtime, but you do need to eat, consider having it in the form of a post-workout shake. So what might a post-workout shake include? That could be something like maybe, source of protein. So maybe protein powder, some good carbs there. So blended oats, and a piece of fruit as well. So maybe like a banana, half a banana, blend that up with some water and you could knock that back. And again, that would actually be beneficial for shift workers too. And this is what I recommend to some of the guards and nurses that I work with, that they bring their own like shake with them, because oftentimes they can go, a couple of hours otherwise without eating. So at least by having some kind of a shake, it's something they can just get quickly, knock it back, going to tie over for a few hours before you're able to actually eat. Okay. Now, the final question then, this is more so like just in relation to lifestyle, and it is, how do you wind down after a stressful day? So for this kind of question, I think it's important to have some routines and rituals in place for whatever it is you're starting or finishing. So for me, for instance, if I am having like a stressful day, what I find that works well, just to kind of clock out from work, is just do like a brain dump. So here beside me, I have a diary, and I kind of fill that in every day. But if sometimes if I just feel overwhelmed at work, I literally just do a brain dump, where at least then I transfer my thoughts from my head onto paper. And once you put it onto paper, at least you can see exactly what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, what's a priority, what's urgent, and what's not a priority, what's not urgent. So just get it on paper, first of all. That'd be one thing that I would recommend. And then like just have some kind of triggers in place that you can use when you start work and when you finish work. So for example, my triggers that I have in place, if I'm to start work of the day, I can, just to avoid procrastination, because there's always some things you just don't want to do, but you got to do them anyways. So the way my trigger to start work is, I'll go onto Google, I'll search online timer, and I'll start that timer. And once that timer starts, it's like a switch for me that I just know, okay, I'm in work mode now. I'm starting work, the timer's on. Now, on the flip side, then if I want to finish up work, what I like to do is I like to sign out for the day, essentially, by creating my to-do list for tomorrow today. So I'll write down exactly what I need to do tomorrow, so I know exactly what my schedule, what my structure is like. And then once I have that down and in place, I can just wind down knowing that, look, I've given my all for today. I've done enough for today. Tomorrow I've got a plan in place. I've got my structure in place. There's only so much that you can do in one single day. So to kind of go back to the question, how to wind down after a stressful day, have some routines or rituals in place that kind of allows you to sign in when you are working and just to sign out when you're finished. And once you say you're finished, you got to hold yourself accountable to the word. You know, turn the laptop off, turn your email notifications off, and just find something that balances you out. So like what just helps you relax? And maybe that might be just, you know, talking to a friend, to a family member. It might be listening to some music. It might be watching Netflix, whatever it might be. Do something for yourself that just helps balance you out and for you to actually wind down. Okay. So that is all for today, guys. I think that we had a nice combination between lifting heavy, between stuck in a plateau, cheat days, eating just before bed, and just your kind of lifestyle and balance and stress. So hopefully you found this podcast beneficial. And please, guys, I would appreciate that if you subscribed and left a review or rating, just because this is only the second one so far in the series. So trying to do one of these every single week. And if you want to find out more about me, you can follow me on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is @MacLifestyleFitness. That's spelled MC Lifestyle Fitness. Or you can also check out my website, MacLifestyleFitness.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hope you found this podcast beneficial. And until next time, have a great day.